Hello, my friend. In today's episode, I'm speaking with my fellow Business for Unicorns coach, Ben Pickard, and I love this conversation so much. I think you will too. In this conversation, we talk about how impossible it is to be effective in work or in life if you're not good at taking care of yourself, how quickly it leads to burnout. And if you're feeling it already at the start of 2024, this is a great episode for you. And if you stick around to the end, we're going to give you the exact tool Ben uses to track his self-care habits on a regular basis. So keep on listening, my friend. It's a great episode to start the year with. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today, I'm back again with Ben. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Hi, everybody.
Hi, it's so good to see you. I think it's the first time you're on the podcast in 2024, so welcome to the new year.
New year. Thank you.
Yeah. Before we dive in, I just want to do a quick reminder to all of our listeners that we have our Unicorn Society retreat coming up in Austin, Texas. It is on March 2nd and March 3rd. And if you are listening to this podcast before January 14th, you can still get some early bird pricing, which means it'll never be any cheaper. We only open up 10 spots to non-Unicorn Society members to come join us at this retreat. And so please let us know if you want to come. DM us on Instagram for more information. As a reminder, this retreat is all about marketing and sales. So in this retreat, you're going to have 2 whole days with us. We're going to learn how to create a steady stream of high quality leads. You're going to learn how to effortlessly convert them into members. You're going to grow your revenue month over month. We have guest speakers like Jordan Sayat joining us. Anyway, it's going to be epic. Austin, Texas, March 2nd. March 3rd. DM us on Instagram for more information. Ben, today's topic is all about self-care. We thought it's the beginning of the new year still. People are still getting their shit together for how they want to show up in the new year. I recorded actually a Moment with Michael podcast at the end of 2023, where we talked a little bit about self-care. We talked about the 4 kind of proactive self-care strategies, but we wanted to circle back to them on today's podcast and use Ben as a real life walking, talking example of what's going on in your self-care world. So before we dive in, can you just talk a little bit about, Ben, for you as an entrepreneur, as a dad, as a partner in life, as someone who is a manager and a leader, like what makes this topic of self-care really matter to you?
Yeah, good question. I really strongly believe that you can't serve from an empty cup. Yeah. And I think we all like intellectually nod, same way you nodded when I said that to that. Yep. But I don't know if we emotionally believe it or more importantly, practically act on it, because it's really not that hard to disprove that temporarily. You can be burned out and still show up to your kid's soccer game or do that consultation. But there's you'd be able to explain it better than me, but a cumulative effect on that. So it's easy to be like, oh, but I could still do this thing even if I'm not taking care of myself. It's not like when self-care drops, you crash and burn. You've got this gray area that you can play with in between that can either be used to fry yourself even further and dig a bigger hole, or you can climb up out of and be the leader you want to be. So to me, I own a gym. I help run Business for Unicorns. I work with other gym owners. There's a leading by example, integrity component, but I also feel a very strong calling to serve others. And if my life's a fucking dumpster fire, I'm not going to be able to serve. So to me, it's really tied to my purpose.
Yeah, I think it's really well said, my friend. You just can't serve from an empty cup. And if all you listeners of this podcast, you're listening to this podcast because you probably have a clear purpose. You probably own a gym. You probably want to serve your team. You probably want to serve your clients. You probably have family members and friends you want to be available to make an impact in their lives. I think, Ben, that's a great way of thinking about it, of I can't make the impact I want to have and fulfill the purpose I have in my life if I'm not in a good place, if I don't have my shit together. Yeah. And I think in my solo podcast that I recorded, I talked about Richard Boyatzis and Annie McKee, who wrote a book, Resident Leadership. And I talk a lot about it. So if listeners, you want to learn more, go listen to that podcast. But the nutshell is they talk about this cycle of kind of continuous suffering that we go through as entrepreneurs and as leaders. It's like this the cycle of suffering and renewal, right? Where we just really push ourselves and stretch ourselves thin and make ourselves available to so many folks. And that has a tendency to either lead to burnout if you don't take care of yourself, or you can keep doing it long term. You can have a long term kind of steady positive impact with some ups and downs if you take good care of yourself. And so let's dive in. And I know in the podcast, I talked about the 4 kind of categories of self-care. There were mindfulness, hope, compassion, and play. So go listen to that podcast if you want to hear more. But talk to me, Ben, a little bit. How are you putting those strategies into action for yourself these days? Or not?
Oh, no, I fucking am in 2024.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I mean, I like to have very short, how do I word this? I like frequent accountability spikes. So I think tracking things like habits daily is much more powerful than tracking them weekly, because you might forget for 24 hours, but that's better than forgetting for 168 hours.
Yeah.
So I took some of the visioning exercises I've learned through BFU and goal setting through all sorts of places, BFU included, and smushed it all together and did a goal setting meeting with my wife. Because she's also self-employed. She sells real estate. She also loves BFU, comes to the retreats. And we talked about the framework of health, wealth, love, which is a framework that's not new to me. It's not new, but I've been thinking about this a lot. And we rated ourselves red, yellow, green in each category. And of course, like many gym owners I talk to, when we own a gym and spend many hours there a week, sometimes it's like the shoemaker's kid always has the worst shoes. The gym owner doesn't always want to do more gym stuff. So we took those goals that we wanted to do based on the traffic lights and turned them into, for the most part, daily habits. And this came from, really just, again, connecting with my purpose that I'm a leader in Men's Group, which is a local organization near me. BFU, my gym, my son is 12 and emulates my behavior, whether I like it or not. So to me, it's if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not going to show up at my best. And to be completely honest, for a while there, I wasn't taking care of my best self, especially over COVID. It was really stressful, as many gym owners experienced. But there was a good chunk of me that was like, thank fucking God. And that was almost a little bit like embarrassing that I'd put myself to the point where I got to the place that now that I wasn't working a ton, I felt immensely guilty about that and worried if I was going to go bankrupt. But I also was like, oh my God, I needed this break. Now it went on way too long.
Sure.
But I developed some habits over that time that do not help me fulfill my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that so much. I want to get into what kind of some of the habits are that came out of that exercise, but I would love for you to just kind of go back and maybe just kind of walk through that exercise again, just to kind of step-by-step directions, because I love the idea of doing this kind of self-audit, either with yourself, with a spouse, coworker, life partner, business partner. Having someone to like walk through this with, I think is so important. But can you just kind of share the actual exercise again with the triangle? I think it's really important. And I want our listeners to take some notes and so they can go do it.
Great. So step 1 was we did visioning for our life for what the next 3 years look like. Me and my wife did this independently. We did it as a date because she wouldn't do it unless we did a date. So we had a nice date. So I'd encourage you, as much as I'm joking about that, don't do it at your gym. Go to the park. Go to a restaurant, go somewhere you don't normally go, get out of your head. And it's set a timer for 10 minutes and just write, pen and paper. Where do you live? How much money do you make? Do you have a dog? How many kids do you have? Do you still have the gym? The sky's the limit. Just vision what you want in 3 years. And most importantly, don't try to figure out the how. It's just the what. Fuck the how. Just the what. Then we basically did the exact same exercise for a 1 year, but we made it a little bit more tactical. So that was more goal setting-esque. So same deal, paper, 10 minutes, write independently, and then we kind of compared our notes and discussed.
Great.
Then I use the framework. So if you picture a triangle or a 3-legged stepping stool, one leg or point is health, which is to me physical, emotional, and mental, but you can decide the subcategories for yourself. Then you have wealth, which is, for me, the subcategories are like investments and retirement, like you on track to not have to do the same thing you're doing today 30 years from now. Are you happy with where you're spending your money and time? And are you making enough money? kind of the three categories for me. So mostly dollar related. And for us entrepreneurs, our purpose and our business are probably pretty intertwined. So that's why I keep that as in there. And then love is just shorthand for relationships because I like that they're all one syllable words and it's easier to remember. So that's honestly my reason.
Yeah.
So that'd be like with your family, with your friends. If you're religious, it could be the relationship with whichever God you choose. I think that also, if you're not self-employed, your passion could live in love because that's something you love to do. But anyways, we have our three categories, and then we rated ourselves red, yellow, and green on the main category, but also the three subcategories. So
Great.
traffic light. Red is not happening. Green is super happening. Yellow is kind of happening. And then we picked the 1 to 3 areas that we wanted to focus on this quarter. So for me, one of those was health. That was my main one that I needed to focus on. And then from there, we determined what are the steps we would take to improve our health. So this might be a perfect segue into what I'm actually doing with my habits this year.
I think that's awesome. Before we get into the habits, I just want to say thank you for sharing that in detail. For our listeners, I hope you're taking notes, but it's, 3 main steps, which is, reflect for a little while on 3 years out, write it down, talk about it, reflect for a little while on 1 year out, write it down, talk about it, and then, create your own version of Ben's triangle. It's a little self-assessment: red light, yellow light, green light. How are you doing in those 3 or 9 areas if you create subcategories? And then talk about it with a partner. And then you can move into, the final step there is really kind of move to action, create some habits. So I love that framework. Thanks, Ben. But then let's keep going. So what kind of habits came out of it for you specifically?
Yeah. One other quick thing on the triangle I should have mentioned, because I've merged some stuff we're learning now with some stuff I learned from a mentor, honestly, a decade ago. Mm-hmm. I think it's better to be yellow in 3 areas than to be green in 2 and red in 1. You don't want to be, I don't want to be super rich, super fit. Everybody hates me and I'm divorced. I would rather have everything be relatively about the same, and you're trying to nudge them up somewhat proportionate. So even though it fits as a triangle, I like the stepping stool analogy, because if 2 legs are too strong, the stepping stool falls over. And that's personal bias. You don't have to do that, but the goal isn't as much to get them all green as it is to get them all into balance and then rise the ships.
I think it's a great example, even though I probably wouldn't hate being fit, rich, and hated, but it's probably not my first choice. So I love the idea that there's no buckets that are completely empty. You're at least getting a yellow, I think is really a great way of looking at it.
Totally.
Yeah. So how about habits for you? What came out of your focus on health?
Well, if you're on a podcast, you can't see this, but I write them pen and paper, which is hilarious because I do everything else digitally. So
there's something about reflecting and things that really helps with pen and paper, right? There's something about it's hard to really be in that kind of nonlinear, daydreamy kind of space when you're in a spreadsheet. And so I think it makes sense that you do this on paper. So yeah, keep on going.
All right. So the habits that I've decided, I have a specific time in the morning that I'm going to get my ass out of bed by, because now that I work from home 4 days a week, it's really easy to roll out of bed and 5 minutes later be on email, but I'm not my best self until I get some coffee in me and some journaling and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I need to increase my protein intake because I always fucking snack at night. I love salty and sweet, which means I love all junk food. And if I'm...
You're not biased.
No, not at all. As my gym owner friends know, more protein, less cravings to snack. So I'm having a double protein shake every morning. 6 days a week, I am in the gym, alternating either workouts or mobility and core. I have a very colorful laundry list of injuries ranging from organ damage to nerve problems to other things that I'm not going to get into in this podcast. But for me, frequency in the gym is far more important than intensity. So I'm trying to do 6 short things a week rather than 3 longer ones.
Great.
5 days a week, I'm doing continuing education. So that varies between audiobooks for personal development type stuff. And we've got stuff we're working on at BFU right now, which is mostly video based. I'm also doing morning gains and gratitude. So I do 3 things that were gains, which is a synonym for wins from the day before. 3 things I'm grateful for and what my focus is for the day. And I want to say 3 wins every day. It's fucking hard. And I don't journal today I'm grateful for this. Mine is literally, it says Grat, short for gratitude, and I have 3 bullet points. It's the quickest journaling ever. But sometimes it takes me 5 minutes to write those 3 words. But I think that's valuable because I believe it's training me at getting better at recognizing wins. Anyone knows a win if you win the lottery. That's not hard to determine. But bigger
Yeah.
wins like a moment you had with your son or an interaction with a client that you just did 1% better. I want to train myself to get better at finding wins so I can be more optimistic.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll also just say this, Ben. I just want to pause there because I think a lot of folks, when they hear like gratitude journals, blah, 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 they start to like roll their eyes and be like, oh, this is like just a bunch of woo woo bullshit. But the reality is it's not. It's not. One of the biggest contributions or additions to like, modern thinking about psychology in the last few decades is really the kind of positive psychology movement. And there's like a mountain of real research and data that suggests that thinking more positively about yourself, about others, about your life has this amazing trickle effect in how you show up, how you perform, how you relate. And so it's not just like woo woo, rub some crystals together bullshit, though. All due respect to my fellow crystal loving people out there, there's really real research that shows that this kind of practice, this kind of habit of thinking about what's going well and leveraging your positives is incredibly beneficial on multiple levels. So I just wanted to interject that for any folks out there who roll their eyes when they think about gratitude journaling.
yeah, no, I appreciate that because I don't know the science as well as you do, but anecdotally, I am measurably happier since I started doing this 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And again, it's short form for gratitude. Like I am logic as hell about it. And at most, it's 3 words. I don't do sentences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a special journal. It's dot paper, super
Yep.
straightforward.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's the most kind of like pared down version. Like this is not Ben sitting with a pen and like crying over his chai latte every morning. This is Ben like writing 3 words a day that get him to connect with like what's fucking going well. And even that has, as you put it, a measurable impact on your overall satisfaction with life. So good for you.
Nice. Yeah, it's the most Ben journal ever, but it works for me.
It is, right? But there's a lot of listeners that are just like you. Like they don't want to do this kind of like self therapy every morning. They just want to like connect with like what's good, and like that's the version you're doing, and that still works. That's still beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got two more habits. One is no screens of any size in bed, no matter what, no exceptions.
Mm.
And I say it that harsh because I would love to decompress. I love movies. I like watching shows. I always enjoyed that type of stuff. But like
Yep.
one show turns into 4 shows, then I check YouTube, and then I go to bed at fucking 12:30 at night with a blue screen in front of my
Yep.
face. And I'm halfway through a fiction book already. It's fucking amazing. Sci-fi thing that I can't pronounce the author's name, but me and my wife agreed. No screens in bed. It's for sleep,
Wow.
sex, and reading. And I want all 3 to improve. As
Yeah.
most of us do.
Great. Yeah. Preach. Yeah.
And then the last habit is no recreational screens until I work out.
Mm.
So if I want to watch my favorite TV show, which I'm really big into Slow Horses with Gary Oldman right now, I don't get to watch that show unless I go to the fucking gym.
Great.
And it works so well for me because there's days from like Saturday, I'm like, I want to play video games or hang out or do whatever that might have a screen related because everything does. Put on my gym clothes, go downstairs for 20 minutes, do some mobility, then I can do that thing. And I mean, these are my habits. I'm not saying they have to be yours, but it makes me feel like I'm taking one baby step towards my purpose closer every day. And for my personality type, what I've learned about myself, again, I like that frequent engagement with a thing rather than like, I have to move this huge boulder today, but then I'll rest tomorrow. I'd rather move it halfway each day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Ben, this list is so fantastic. Not only do I think it's fantastic because I know you and I know how much this stuff matters to you and this is going to work for you, but I think it's such a beautiful illustration of how you took this like self-reflective exercise with your lady and you turned it into like real, actual kind of rules you live by, right? Like real habits that you commit to, that it's so tangible and tactical, right? And we talk all the time on this podcast. We use this phrase of like setting up your day to be like a game you can win. And you you have set up like the rules of your day, the habits of your day to really help you win, to help you fulfill your purpose and be stoked about your life. And I think it's such a beautiful illustration of like how this kind of self-care can translate to like an actually better fucking life. Right? It's not just like some woo-woo exercise. Like you are leading a better life every day when you do these things you've committed to.
100%. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know we're getting longer now. Can I add one quick thing that helps with the game you can win?
Yeah. Go for it.
The rows are my habits. The days are my columns. I just do a check mark if I did the thing I said I would do. End of the week, I write a number for my total. In the next column over, just draw lines on my paper, I do the cumulative total for the year. And I love this because when you get to a point where you're like, I'm not doing enough walks or protein shakes or whatever, you look at your thing like, holy fuck, I'm at 120. Even though today it feels true to me that I haven't done anything to make progress, that's not objectively true with a capital T. And I find that so incredibly motivating to like not just get streaks, but to see like, oh, I'm doing way better than I thought I was. That's half the reason I like data.
That's amazing.
It's a great gut check.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do we have a template for that? I mean, in real time, I'm asking you, like, is there a template for that we could use or share? Because I think a lot of people would love to have that.
I could make a doc pretty easily.
Yeah, well, let's do that. I'm going to, in real time in this podcast, I'm committing to, if you can't do it, I'll do it. But we'll actually make a version of that template and just put it in the show notes so you all can get into it. Some of you I know want something like that, but are not great at spreadsheets yet. And so let us just give you one that you can just plug in your habits to and start using. Because I think just having that simple routine of checking the box, yes or no, and then seeing a cumulative effect over time, I think it's such a winning combination. So yeah, thanks for that. And dear listeners, it'll be down in the show notes down below. We'll share something with you. All right, my friend. Well, let's wrap it up. This was so helpful. I know that some listeners are maybe sick of us talking about self-care since this is the second podcast in a few weeks. But the reason we talk about it is because, as Ben said so beautifully on this podcast, it is like, it is the necessary component to you living a fulfilling, purposeful life. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and impact your life in a positive way and those around you, you need to be good at caring for yourself. Nothing else happens if you're in a shitty place. So thanks for this great conversation, Ben. As so valuable as always. And dear listener, if you want to join us in Austin, Texas, go DM us on Instagram for more information about that retreat, which again is happening March 2nd and 3rd. If you reach out to us before January 14th, get the cheapest possible pricing. Thanks for a great episode, Ben. See you on the next one.
Thank you. Talk soon.